Chapter 1. The Beast Reveals Its Teeth. August 15, 1944, 14:30 hours, Falaise Pocket, Normandy. Through the smoke and thunder of collapsing German lines, Oberst Hans Philipp squinted skyward as massive shadows swept overhead. The roar was different, deeper, more menacing than the familiar drone of Allied heavy bombers. These weren't the predictable formations of B-17 flying fortresses lumber toward distant industrial targets. These were fighters, yet each carried a bomb load. That would make a Stuka pilot envious. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, once mockingly dismissed by Luftwaffe pilots as the fat American, was rewriting the rules of air warfare before German eyes. What Wehrmacht commanders witnessed that day shattered decades of aviation doctrine built on European assumptions about air combat. Here was a 7-ton fighter, heavier than a Heinkel He-111 medium bomber, delivering precision strikes with 2,500 pounds of ordnance while maintaining the agility to dogfight Me-109s minutes later. The contrast with German design philosophy was stark and devastating. The Germans had perfected specialized aircraft through meticulous engineering. The Ju-87 Stuka for ground attack, with its screaming dive brakes and precision bombing capability. The Bf-109 for air superiority, refined through years of Spanish Civil War experience. The Ju-88 for fast bombing, versatile but ultimately compromised by competing requirements. American pragmatism had created something entirely different, a flying Swiss Army knife that excelled at everything while mastering the art of tactical devastation. The P-47 represented a fundamental shift in military thinking. Instead of perfecting individual tools for specific tasks, American engineers had built a single tool capable of performing multiple missions with devastating effectiveness. The carnage below testified to this new reality with brutal clarity. German Panzer columns, once masters of blitzkrieg warfare who had terrorized Europe from Poland to the gates of Moscow, now cowered in hedgerows like frightened animals as P-47s dove from 15,000 feet at speeds exceeding 450 mph. Each attack run lasted mere seconds, yet left burning vehicles, shattered morale, and tactical paralysis in its wake. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. German troops learned to fear clear skies more than artillery barrages. Colonel Joseph Myers of the 405th Fighter Group recorded in his mission report, filed at 18:45 hours. Enemy resistance collapsed completely after 3 passes, counted 47 burning vehicles in single field northeast of Chambois. No return fire observed after second attack. Enemy personnel abandoned vehicles and fled on foot into woods. Similar reports flooded 9 Fighter Command headquarters throughout the day, painting a picture of systematic destruction that exceeded even optimistic pre-mission expectations. The tactical situation that day illustrated the P-47's revolutionary impact on combined arms warfare. German forces, compressed into an increasingly narrow pocket by converging Allied armies, had concentrated their remaining armor and transport in desperate attempts to maintain unit cohesion. Traditional military doctrine suggested that such concentrations would be vulnerable to heavy bomber attack, but the bocage terrain of Normandy made precision bombing nearly impossible from high altitude. Enter the Thunderbolt, capable of identifying, engaging, and destroying individual vehicles with accuracy no strategic bomber could match. Major General Elwood Pete Quesada, commanding the 9th Fighter Command, had positioned his P-47 squadrons at forward airfields, barely 20 miles from the front lines. This proximity allowed rapid response to ground controller requests and multiple sorties per aircraft per day. The tactical innovation was profound. Instead of waiting for heavy bombers to be assembled, briefed, and dispatched from distant bases, close air support could be delivered within minutes of request. The P-47's transformation from disappointment to devastation began in the factories of Farmingdale, Long Island, where Republic Aviation dared to challenge conventional wisdom about fighter design, while European designers pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for traditional dogfighting. Alexander Kartveli envisioned something audacious, a fighter that could climb to 40,000 feet to escort bombers, carry bombs to Berlin for ground attack missions, and still outfight anything in the sky during air-to-air combat. Critics called it impossible. The Luftwaffe would soon call it catastrophic. This was no accident of engineering serendipity. It was revolution by deliberate design philosophy, where the sleek Spitfire carried 150 rounds per gun in its elegant wing structure. The Thunderbolt packed 425 rounds for each of its 8 machine guns, providing 30 seconds of continuous fire at maximum rate. Where the nimble Mustang could carry 1,000 pounds of bombs as a secondary capability, the Jug hauled 2,500 pounds without breaking stride, transforming bombing from occasional mission to primary role. The numbers told a story of American industrial might applied to tactical innovation: more firepower, more protection, more versatility. By summer 1944, German supply officers were documenting an unprecedented logistics crisis that threatened the Wehrmacht's ability to conduct organized resistance. Railway schedules had become meaningless as locomotives vanished in thunderous explosions, their twisted remains scattered across French countryside. Truck convoys evaporated under the guns of aircraft that appeared without warning, struck with surgical precision, and vanished before flak guns could traverse to target them. The beast had revealed its teeth, and they were sharper, more numerous, and more devastating than anyone had imagined possible. Chapter 2. Forged in doubt, tempered by necessity. The P-47's genesis traced back to 1940, when Republic aviation faced a technological and strategic dilemma that would ultimately define modern fighter design philosophy. Alexander Kartvel's engineering team had inherited the lightweight P-43 Lancer, a conventional interceptor that represented the culmination of 1930s fighter design thinking. The P-43 was fast, maneuverable, and aesthetically pleasing, but combat reports from Europe revealed its fundamental inadequacy against modern warfare's demands. Rather than incrementally refine a failed concept, Kartveli chose technological revolution. His AP-10 design proposal, submitted to the Army Air Corps in November 1940, shocked military aviation establishment with its audacious specifications: a fighter weighing 12,000 pounds empty, powered by the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, producing 2,000 horsepower. To put this in perspective, the proposed fighter weighed more than a B-25 Mitchell medium bomber's empty weight, yet was expected to dogfight with nimble interceptors. The proposal challenged every assumption about air combat that had developed since World War I. The Army Air Corps, led by visionary officers like Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Kelsey, recognized that future air warfare would demand capabilities beyond traditional fighter roles. Intelligence reports from the Battle of Britain indicated that high-altitude combat would be crucial, requiring turbo-supercharged engines for effective performance above 25,000 feet. Simultaneously, the German Blitzkrieg campaigns demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of close air support, suggesting that fighters would need ground attack capabilities. The AP-10 proposal promised to address both requirements in a single airframe. The engineering challenges were staggering and unprecedented in aviation history. The R2800 engine alone weighed 2,360 pounds, more than entire European fighters like the Bf-109E. To achieve the required high-altitude performance, Kartveli designed a turbo supercharger system that required exhaust ducting running the aircraft's full length from engine to tail. The turbo supercharger itself, mounted in the dual rear fuselage, weighed an additional 500 pounds and required complex control systems. The result was a fuselage so large that pilots joked about needing a ladder to reach the cockpit, and so heavy that skeptics questioned whether it could even get airborne. The XP-47B prototype, first flown on May 6, 1941, by Republic test pilot Lowry Brabham, was a mechanical monster that defied every principle of fighter design established over 2 decades of aviation development. At 13,500 pounds fully loaded, it weighed twice as much as its contemporaries. The wingspan of 40 feet 9 inches exceeded that of many twin-engine aircraft. Most shocking to observers was the sheer size of the machine. It looked more like a small bomber than a fighter. Early flight testing revealed fundamental problems that nearly killed the program before it could demonstrate its potential. During initial Army Air Force's evaluation at Wright Field, the prototype's performance characteristics seemed to confirm critics' worst fears. Acceleration was sluggish compared to contemporary fighters. The P-47B required 1.2 minutes to reach 15,000 feet, while a Bf-109F could achieve the same altitude in 55 seconds. The rate of climb at sea level was a disappointing 2,130 feet per minute, compared to 3,100 feet per minute for the Spitfire Phi. Forward visibility was severely compromised by the massive engine cowling, creating dangerous blind spots during takeoff and landing. The cockpit, positioned far aft to balance the heavy engine, gave pilots a sensation of flying a cargo aircraft rather than a nimble fighter. Control response at low speeds was sluggish, and the aircraft's turning radius was disappointingly large. Most critically for European combat conditions, the aircraft's size made it easily detectable and vulnerable to surprise attack. Colonel Cassow's official evaluation report, filed September 15, 1941, was brutally honest in its assessment. The XP-47B demonstrates excellent high-altitude performance and possesses devastating firepower, but climbs like a homesick angel and turns like a freight train. Low-altitude performance is inadequate for European combat conditions, where most air battles occur below 20,000 feet. Aircraft size presents significant tactical disadvantages. Recommend extensive modifications or program termination pending further evaluation. Similar criticism emerged from experienced combat pilots returning from Europe, who had witnessed the deadly ballet of air combat over Britain and France. These veterans favored the lighter, more maneuverable Curtiss P-40 Warhawk, which, despite its limitations, could dogfight effectively with German and Italian fighters. Captain Claire Chenot, fresh from organizing the American volunteer group in China, was particularly vocal in his criticism. The P-47 is too big, too heavy, and too slow on the deck. In combat, you need agility, not brute force. Yet beneath the aircraft's ungainly appearance lay engineering genius that would revolutionize air warfare. The massive airframe wasn't a design flaw. It was a calculated trade-off that prioritized survivability and versatility over traditional fighter virtues. The aircraft's philosophy fundamentally contradicted established fighter doctrine, but in ways that would prove prophetic. Where the Supermarine Spitfire achieved grace through minimalism and weight reduction, the Thunderbolt embraced maximalism and robust construction. Its 850 caliber machine guns could fire 3,400 rounds per minute, more concentrated firepower than most heavy bombers. Each gun was fed by 425 rounds of ammunition, providing 30 seconds of continuous fire compared to 15 seconds for most fighters. The massive engine allowed speeds exceeding 400 mph in level flight and devastating high-speed dives approaching 500 mph, faster than many fighters could safely achieve. Most importantly, the robust construction featured innovations that would save thousands of pilots' lives. Self-sealing fuel tanks, pioneered by American industry, could absorb multiple hits without catastrophic fire. Armor plating protected vital systems and the pilot from ground fire. Structural redundancy meant that battle damage that would destroy lighter aircraft merely reduced the P-47's performance. The landing gear was so robust that pilots could execute carrier-style landings on rough forward airstrips without structural failure. Production authorization came in December 1941, just days after Pearl Harbor transformed American aviation requirements overnight. Suddenly, the Army Air Forces needed every fighter it could get, regardless of theoretical limitations. The P-47's development accelerated dramatically as Republic aviation geared up for mass production, but early combat reports from Europe continued to be discouraging. The 56th Fighter Group's initial encounters with experienced Luftwaffe pilots in early 1943 revealed tactical limitations that nearly ended the P-47 program. Pilots complained about poor climb rate, inadequate maneuverability, and vulnerability to surprise attack. Some squadron commanders advocated replacing their Thunderbolts with P-51 Mustangs entirely, arguing that the P-47 was fundamentally unsuited for air-to-air combat. What these critics failed to recognize was that the P-47 wasn't designed to fight the last war. It was engineered for a conflict that hadn't yet begun, one where air superiority would be achieved not through dogfighting prowess alone, but through versatility, survivability, and the ability to dominate multiple aspects of air warfare simultaneously. Chapter 3. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. The metamorphosis began on March 15, 1943, when Major General Pete Quesada, commanding the E-Dike Fighter Command, authorized the first systematic fighter-bomber experiments that would revolutionize tactical aviation. Quesada, a former bomber pilot who understood the limitations of strategic aviation against tactical targets, recognized that the P-47's robust construction and powerful engine made it ideal for ground attack missions. What started as desperate improvisation would become the foundation of modern close air support doctrine. Flight tests at Eglin Field, conducted by Captain Robert Baseler and a team of experimental pilots, proved that a standard P-47D could safely carry 1,000 pounds of bombs without significantly compromising flight characteristics. More remarkably, engineers discovered that the aircraft's massive wing structure, originally designed to support the heavy fuselage during high-G maneuvers, could accommodate external pylons for even heavier loads. Load tests demonstrated that 2,500 pounds of ordnance could be carried safely, though with reduced range and ceiling. The technical breakthrough came from understanding the P-47's structural margins. Unlike European fighters built to minimum weight standards, the Thunderbolt incorporated safety factors that allowed extensive modification without compromising airworthiness. Wing spars designed to handle 12G loads in air combat could easily support external stores. The landing gear, already robust enough to handle the aircraft's enormous weight, could accommodate the additional bomb load without modification. By June 1943, the 368th Fighter Group, stationed at Ibbsley Airfield in southern England, was conducting live fire trials over the English Channel, developing tactics that would reshape air warfare. Squadron leader Robert Johnson, who would become one of the P-47's highest-scoring aces, initially resisted the transition from pure fighter to fighter bomber. "We trained to fight other fighters, not bomb trucks and trains." It felt like a waste of a good interceptor. The tactical development process required extensive experimentation with dive angles, release altitudes, and recovery techniques. Unlike purpose-built dive bombers with automatic pull-out systems, P-47 pilots had to manually control their aircraft through high-speed dives that could easily exceed structural limits. Training accidents were frequent. 3 aircraft were lost in June 1943 alone due to pilot error during bombing practice. However, combat results quickly demonstrated the concept's devastating potential. On July 30, 1943, 12 P-47s of the 353rd Fighter Squadron attacked a German supply convoy near Abbeville, destroying 47 vehicles in a single pass. The mission report filed by Major Glenn Duncan noted, bombs were released from 8,000 feet in 60-degree dives. All targets destroyed or damaged. No enemy fighter interference observed. No friendly losses. The Mao breakthrough came from necessity rather than doctrine. As Allied heavy bombers systematically devastated German industrial centers through 1943, Wehrmacht forces adapted by dispersing into smaller, more mobile units that traditional strategic bombing couldn't effectively target. Concentrated aircraft factories could be bombed by formations of B-17s, but individual locomotives dispersed across thousands of miles of railway couldn't be economically targeted by strategic aviation. Fighter bombers offered the precision and flexibility that strategic bombing lacked. Railroad destruction became the P-47's specialty through a combination of tactical innovation and target vulnerability. German railways, built to European loading gauge standards, were more lightly constructed than American equivalents. A single 500-pound bomb could destroy a locomotive beyond repair, while multiple hits could crater tracks and destroy signals, blocking traffic for days. Unlike bridges, which could be bypassed or quickly repaired, locomotive destruction had cumulative effects that progressively degraded German transportation capacity. Operation Overlord marked the P-47's tactical debut as a dedicated ground attack platform in large-scale combat operations. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, 36 Thunderbolt squadrons flew 267 sorties from English bases, dropping 500 tons of bombs on German defensive positions while simultaneously claiming 31 enemy aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat. The dual capability proved decisive in ways that single-role aircraft couldn't match. The tactical innovation was profound. P-47s could establish air superiority over the battlefield by destroying or driving off Luftwaffe interceptors, then immediately transition to close air support missions without returning to base for reconfiguration. This flexibility allowed continuous air cover for ground forces while maintaining offensive pressure against German positions. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski, leading the 61st Fighter Squadron over Omaha Beach, reported, "We owned the airspace completely. German ground forces had no air cover whatsoever, and we could attack any target of opportunity without fear of interception." Pre-invasion intelligence had identified 847 German strong points along the Normandy coast, each requiring neutralization before Allied infantry could advance inland. Traditional naval bombardment could destroy some positions, but others were protected by terrain or camouflage that made artillery ineffective. P-47s, attacking in successive waves at altitudes below 1,000 feet, could identify and destroy concealed positions that other weapons couldn't engage. The Falaise Pocket operation, conducted August 12–21, 1944, demonstrated the Thunderbolt's strategic impact when employed in concentrated tactical missions. German forces, retreating from the Normandy breakout, became trapped in an increasingly narrow corridor between converging Allied armies. Flying from advanced airfields constructed by combat engineers just behind the front lines, P-47s of the Nied Fighter Command destroyed an estimated 3,000 German vehicles in 9 days of continuous operations. The tactical situation was unprecedented in aviation history. German forces, compressed into a space roughly 15 miles wide and 25 miles long, had concentrated virtually their entire remaining armor and transport in desperate attempts to escape encirclement. Pilot reports described target-rich environments where entire Wehrmacht columns stretched for miles without air cover, unable to disperse due to terrain constraints and Allied ground pressure. Colonel Glenn Duncan of the 353rd Fighter Group, flying his 75th combat mission on August 17th, recorded in his post-flight report, "We caught them in the open with nowhere to hide. Vehicles stretched for miles without air cover or effective flak protection. It was like shooting fish in a barrel, but the strategic impact was enormous. Every truck destroyed meant ammunition not reaching German infantry. Every fuel tanker eliminated meant immobilized armor." The destruction was so complete that German commanders lost the ability to conduct organized retreats. Field Marshal Günther von Kluge, commanding Army Group West, radioed OKW headquarters on August 16th. Tactical movement has become impossible during daylight hours due to constant air attack. Enemy fighter bombers destroy any concentration of vehicles immediately. Division-level operations cannot be coordinated due to communications breakdown. The Thunderbolt's versatility allowed mission flexibility unprecedented in aviation history. A typical P-47 squadron could launch with bombs for a supply depot, engage enemy fighters en route, deliver ordnance on target, strafe locomotives on the return journey, and still have ammunition for defensive combat against interceptors. This multi-role capability forced German commanders to defend everywhere simultaneously, an impossible task that accelerated Wehrmacht collapse across Western Europe. Statistical analysis compiled by Nied Fighter Command intelligence officers reveals the scope of systematic destruction. Between June and December 1944, P-47s claimed 9,000 locomotives destroyed or damaged, along with 86,000 railroad cars and 68,000 motor vehicles. These numbers represented more than material loss. They signified the complete breakdown of German logistics, making organized resistance increasingly impossible as ammunition, fuel, and replacement equipment failed to reach frontline units. Chapter 4. Through German Eyes, written in Fire Luftwaffe Ace Oberst Günther Rall, with 275 confirmed victories making him the third highest scoring fighter pilot in history, provided chilling first-hand testimony about confronting P-47s in the deadly skies of late 1944. Shot down by Thunderbolts on May 12, 1944, while flying his Bf-109G6 Gustav over Romania, Rall later described the encounter with the clinical precision of a professional pilot analyzing his own near-death experience. They came out of the sun in a steep dive formation, 4 P-47s in perfect tactical spacing, Rall recalled in post-war interviews. By the time I saw them, it was already too late. My wingman called the warning, but these Americans had planned their attack perfectly. The lead aircraft fired one burst from approximately 300 meters, perhaps 400 rounds total. My engine exploded immediately, oil covered the windscreen, the cockpit filled with smoke, and I was falling through 15,000 feet with a dead aircraft. Rall survived the encounter with severe spinal injuries that ended his combat career, but his experience was repeated thousands of times across European skies as experienced German pilots fell victim to increasingly aggressive and skilled American fighter tactics. What made Rall's shoot-down particularly significant was his reputation as one of the Luftwaffe's most accomplished pilots. If someone of his caliber could be overwhelmed so quickly, it indicated fundamental shifts in aerial combat dynamics. The German pilot's analysis revealed tactical innovations that the Luftwaffe struggled to counter. The Americans had learned to use their aircraft's strengths while minimizing their weaknesses, Rall observed. They avoided turning combat where our fighters maintained advantages, instead using high-speed diving attacks that exploited the P-47's superior weight and power. When we tried to climb after them, their turbo-supercharged engines gave them performance we couldn't match above 20,000 feet. Wehrmacht after-action reports from the Western Front documented systematic destruction of tactical mobility that went far beyond individual aircraft losses. Major General Fritz Bayerlein, commanding the elite Panzer Lehr Division during Operation Cobra in July 1944, reported losing 70% of his armored vehicles to air attack in just 48 hours of combat. His situation report to Army Group West, filed July 25, 1944, painted a picture of tactical helplessness in the face of overwhelming air power. The enemy aircraft appear in waves of 30 to 40 machines every 2 hours during daylight, Bayerlein reported. They attack any movement with devastating precision, destroying vehicles, equipment, and personnel before our flak can respond effectively. Daylight movement has become impossible across the entire division sector. Combat effectiveness has been reduced to 20% of authorized strength, with most losses attributable to air attack rather than ground combat. Bayerlein's experience was replicated across German formations throughout France as P-47s systematically destroyed the Wehrmacht's ability to maneuver tactically. The Panzer Lehr Division, considered one of Germany's most effective armored formations, had been reduced to company-sized remnants within a week of encountering concentrated American fighter-bomber operations. Traditional German tactics, based on rapid movement and concentration of force, became suicidal when attempted under American air supremacy. German intelligence reports revealed growing desperation in Luftwaffe ranks as pilots struggled to adapt to changing tactical conditions. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, commanding Jagdgeschwader 77 and himself a 176 victory ace, wrote in his August 1944 operations summary, "American fighter bombers are systematically destroying our ability to support ground forces through a combination of air superiority and ground attack missions. Our fighters, optimized for high-altitude interception, cannot effectively engage these low-level attackers without abandoning their primary mission." Steinhoff identified the tactical dilemma that crippled German air operations. When we climb to intercept American heavy bombers, their fighter escorts, including P-47s, engage us at our preferred altitudes. When we descend to attack their fighter bombers, they transform into formidable air-to-air opponents with superior firepower and survivability. We cannot be everywhere simultaneously, and they exploit our tactical limitations ruthlessly. The psychological impact of constant air attack was documented in German unit reports throughout 1944. Soldiers learned to fear clear weather more than enemy artillery, as cloudless skies brought inevitable P-47 attacks against any visible movement. German infantry units began moving only at night or during periods of poor visibility, dramatically reducing operational tempo and tactical flexibility. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Armored Troops, submitted a strategic assessment to OKW in September 1944 that acknowledged the fundamental shift in tactical balance. American tactical aviation has achieved effects on ground operations that exceed those of strategic bombing. Our armored formations, once capable of rapid maneuver warfare, are now confined to defensive positions due to constant air attack. The enemy has achieved tactical paralysis through air power alone. The mathematics of destruction overwhelmingly favored American tactical aviation over German defensive measures. A single B-17 Flying Fortress cost $238,000 in 1944 and required Acre-Wofton highly trained specialists to deliver 800 pounds of bombs with questionable occur against small tactical targets. 4 P-47Ds cost $320,000 total, $80,000 each, required only 4 pilots, and could deliver 5,000 pounds of ordnance with precision while providing their own fighter escort against interceptors. The economics. Efficiency was staggering when analyzed systematically. Strategic bombing required massive formations, extensive fighter escorts, and elaborate logistics to achieve uncertain results against tactical targets. P-47s could operate from forward airfields with minimal support, respond immediately to tactical requirements, and achieve measurable results on individual missions. Tactical aviation achieved strategic effects at half the cost of heavy bombing. Combat loss ratios further demonstrated Thunderbolt superiority in ways that German commanders found increasingly difficult to counter. Against all German aircraft types combined, P-47s maintained a kill ratio of 4.61, destroying 4.6 enemy aircraft for every Thunderbolt lost in air-to-air combat. This ratio included encounters with experienced German aces flying superior aircraft like the FW-190D and Me-262 jet fighter. More remarkably, the overall loss rate across 746,000 combat sorties was only 0.7%, including losses to flak, mechanical failure, and operational accidents. No aircraft in aviation history had achieved such effectiveness across such diverse mission profiles, fundamentally altering how air forces would be organized and employed in future conflicts. German technical intelligence reports compiled from examination of crashed P-47s revealed grudging respect for American engineering and manufacturing capabilities. A Luftwaffe technical evaluation dated October 15, 1944 noted, "The enemy aircraft demonstrates superior construction techniques and materials science. Battle damage that would destroy German fighters merely reduces P-47 performance. Pilot protection systems and self-sealing fuel tanks represent significant advances in survivability that we cannot match with current production methods." The report continued with observations that highlighted German industrial limitations. Engine reliability exceeds German standards by significant margins. Armament effectiveness is superior to comparable German installations. Aircraft can sustain operations from forward airfields under conditions that would ground German fighters. Maintenance requirements are minimal compared to our high-performance aircraft. By late 1944, German pilots had developed deep respect for the P-47's capabilities, even as they struggled to counter its tactical impact. Major Erich Hartmann, the highest-scoring fighter ace in history with 352 victories, wrote in his combat diary, "The Thunderbolt pilot who knows his aircraft's capabilities is nearly invincible in the hands of a skilled flyer. They have learned to fight to their strengths while avoiding our advantages. It is a formidable opponent that has changed the nature of air combat." Chapter 5. The Thunder That Echoes. Still, the final accounting of the P-47's war reveals numbers that fundamentally redefined military aviation, doctrine and established principles that govern air power employment to this day. Of 15,683 Thunderbolts produced between 1941 and 1945, these mechanical juggernauts delivered 132,000 tons of ordnance, equivalent to the bomb load of 100 B-17 Flying Fortress missions. Yet this tonnage struck with precision, impossible for strategic bombers, destroying tactical targets that crippled German resistance more effectively than the massive city bombing campaigns that dominated Allied strategic thinking. Post-war analysis conducted by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, led by economist John Kenneth Galbraith and involving hundreds of researchers, reached conclusions that validated tactical aviation doctrine over strategic bombing theory. While heavy bombers devastated German industrial capacity through area bombing, P-47s severed the critical connections between production centers and frontline units through precision interdiction campaigns. The survey's findings were revolutionary. Each ton of P-47 delivered ordnance achieved measurably greater military impact than strategic bombing, validating close air support and interdiction doctrine that persists in modern air forces. Railroad destruction was so systematic and complete that by late 1944, Wehrmacht units were receiving ammunition by ox cart and horse-drawn wagons, reverting to 19th-century logistics in the middle of mechanized warfare. Colonel Hans von Luck, commanding the 21st Panzer Division during the Normandy campaign, provided post-war testimony that illustrated the cumulative effects of tactical aviation. "We had excellent tanks without fuel, powerful guns without shells, and sophisticated radios without batteries. The Americans had systematically cut every supply line, destroyed every depot, and eliminated every transport vehicle. We were reduced to scavenging like medieval armies." The strategic implications extended far beyond material destruction. German unit cohesion, built on decades of professional military training and combat experience, disintegrated under constant air attack. Officers couldn't communicate with subordinate units, logistics became impossible to coordinate, and tactical movement could only be attempted under cover of darkness. The Wehrmacht, once masters of rapid maneuver warfare, became a static defensive force incapable of conducting offensive operations. The Thunderbolt pioneered the multi-role fighter concept that dominates modern air forces through a combination of technological innovation and tactical flexibility. Today's Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II, deliberately named to honor the P-47's successor, carries forward the same design philosophy of versatility over specialization. Like the Thunderbolt, the F-35 sacrifices pure air-to-air performance for the ability to excel at multiple mission types simultaneously, including air, superiority, ground attack, reconnaissance, and electronic warfare. The technological lineage is direct and measurable. The McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom, which served as the backbone of American air power from Vietnam through the Gulf War, was explicitly designed according to P-47 principles: heavy, fast, powerful, and adaptable to diverse missions. The F-4's ability to carry 18,000 pounds of ordnance while maintaining air-to-air combat capability directly descended from Kartvel's original vision of a fighter that could bomb and dogfight with equal effectiveness. European aircraft manufacturers learned harsh lessons about American pragmatism versus German perfectionism through painful combat experience. The Luftwaffe's specialized aircraft, Bf-109s optimized for high-altitude interception, FW-190s designed for low-altitude combat, Me-262s built for pure speed, excelled individually in their designated roles but failed systemically when confronted with versatile opponents capable of adapting to changing tactical conditions. The P-47's success demonstrated that good enough performance across multiple roles defeats perfect performance in a single role, a lesson that modern air forces have universally embraced. Today's air forces have abandoned specialized interceptors, dedicated attack aircraft, and single-role platforms in favor of multi-role fighters capable of air-to-air combat, ground attack, reconnaissance, electronic warfare, and even aerial refueling missions. Combat pilot testimonies reveal the human dimension of technological superiority that statistics alone cannot capture. Captain Robert Johnson, the European theatre's second-highest-scoring P-47 ace, with 28 confirmed victories, wrote in his post-war memoir, "The jug wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast on the deck, and it certainly wasn't agile in a dogfight. But it brought you home when other fighters would have killed you. I took hits that punched holes through both wings, shot away half my tail and knocked out my radio, but the old Thunderbolt kept flying." Johnson's experience was repeated thousands of times as P-47 pilots survived combat damage that would have destroyed lighter aircraft. The robust construction that critics had denounced as excessive weight proved to be life-saving redundancy. Self-sealing fuel tanks prevented catastrophic fires, armor plating protected vital systems, and structural strength allowed pilots to execute emergency landings that would have been impossible in more lightly built fighters. Major Pierce McKinnon, who flew 155 combat missions in P-47s, provided analysis that captured the aircraft's tactical revolution. "We changed the rules of air combat by refusing to accept limitations. Other fighters were either good at air-to-air or air-to-ground. We were deadly at both. German pilots never knew whether we were coming after them or their supply lines, and that uncertainty forced them to spread their defenses everywhere." The industrial achievement represented by P-47 production validated American manufacturing capabilities on a scale that impressed even German engineers. Republic Aviation's Farmingdale plant, working around the clock with 3 shifts, produced one complete P-47 every 94 minutes at peak production rates. This manufacturing tempo, sustained for nearly 4 years, demonstrated industrial capacity that German planners had considered impossible. Quality control maintained throughout mass production ensured that late-war P-47s were actually superior to early models, incorporating lessons learned from combat operations and technological improvements developed through operational experience. The P-47D-25, produced in 1944, featured improved armor, upgraded avionics, and structural refinements that made it arguably the most effective fighter bomber of World War II. As the last P-47 thundered off European runways in 1945, it left behind more than impressive combat statistics. It had proven that the future belonged to aircraft that could adapt rather than specialize. The concept of air superiority through versatility, rather than through perfection in single roles, became the foundation of post-war air doctrine development. Modern stealth fighters, from the F-117 Nighthawk to the F-22 Raptor, incorporate multi-role capabilities as fundamental design requirements rather than afterthoughts. The ability to switch from air-to-air to air-to-ground missions without returning to base for reconfiguration, pioneered by the P-47, is now considered essential for any frontline fighter aircraft. Like thunder that continues echoing long after lightning strikes, the P-47's impact reverberates through every fighter bomber that followed, every close air support mission flown, every pilot who trusts versatility over perfection. The beast that German commanders once dismissed as too heavy to fight had become the blueprint for modern air power itself, proving that American pragmatism and adaptability could defeat European specialization through superior integration of diverse capabilities. In the end, the Thunderbolt didn't just win a war, it defined how wars would be fought in the sky forever after, establishing principles of air power employment that remain valid in an era of stealth technology, precision-guided munitions, and networked warfare. The thunder still echoes and modern air forces still listen.